Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. In the interest of keeping everybody who's on Zoom from falling asleep, we should probably get started. We do have a lot of people here on Zoom tonight, which I really love because, you know, people can't travel this far all the time. And so having a nice topic like this, a very interesting topic that we're going to delve into tonight is going to be so important. I think that everybody should just remember to try to arm yourself with as much information as possible going into this election, because people are going to have, especially now with all these strange, you know, and misinformation that's going around, people are going to have a lot of questions, not just Republicans, independents and Democrats. And the more of us that know and can get that information out, our job is really to educate the public. So, all right, so let's just get started with our meeting. First of all, thank everybody for coming. Okay, so are there any elected officials here tonight or candidates that are going to be running in the fall? Raise your hand. All right. Okay. Stephanie, do you want to come up real quick and just say hi? Stephanie Rothies.
Rafis.
Stephanie Rafis. Where are you from? So get it one.
I'm Steph Rafis. I'm running for the state house this year in District 187, which is Lower McKenzie, Albertus, the western half of Upper McKenzie, Heidelberg, Weisenberg, and Washington and Lynn Township. So basically like the western and northwestern corner of the Lehigh County.
Very good. Yay!
Rafis.
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 Right. Okay, Rafis. I'm gonna say it right from now on. Okay, or maybe not. I don't know. Okay. Now, I just want to thank everybody here and on Zoom and everybody who's not here right now, but could watch this recording later. We did a fabulous job in the primary. Let's give ourselves a round of applause for that. We won 4 out of our 5 endorsements for all the state stuff. And then we also won 2. Well, actually, the two that we endorsed, we won both of those races for the state house as well. So we did an excellent job. Joe Kahn came in first in our 2 counties, even though he didn't win overall. So we have Lehigh LV4ALL has a big influence on what goes on politically in the valley now. And I just appreciate you so much. This group of people, you're so friendly, you're so willing to do whatever, you're so like no hidden agendas, no arguing, no fighting. You guys just get it done in a fun, family kind of way. And that's why I love coming here, and that's why we all love coming here. And that's why I know that you're gonna really make a difference in November, and I think we're gonna be okay. But let's not say anything yet, because we have a long way to go till then. We're gonna work our butts off for the next 6 months, right? Right. Okay. So when we were here at Christmas time, we gave everybody a fridge magnet, and then you had a thing that you clicked on it that said all the dates up to the primary. Did you guys remember that? Not everybody got one. So guess what? The dates that we gave you before only went up until April 23rd. So now you need all new dates for your fridge for the fall. So I'm going to pass this around. It's got every date between now and election day of things that we're doing. There's one, we're still just messing with our fundraiser in September. But other than that, all the dates are here. And I want you to take one. And if you didn't get a fridge magnet that says Lehigh LV4ALL on it, get one of those too, so that you can have these on your fridge. I know we've had a couple of people come up and say, I couldn't figure out where this was, and I looked at my fridge magnet and then I got here. So if you didn't get one yet, I'm going to pass this around. Anybody on Zoom, we can put in the chat and I will send one to you. I'll email you the list of our dates, and then I can even send you a fridge magnet if you want. So everybody get this on your fridge right now. Okay, now, thank you again for everybody gathering up and returning the signs that were after the polling locations. We're gonna use quite a few of them again, including the Susan Wild and the Biden. So make sure that if you still have some at home, you can bring them to the next meeting or just leave them here somewhere during the normal business hours and we'll take care of it. But thank you so much for bringing it back. The next thing that I want to talk about with signs is you see the big barn sign there for Susan Wild. We had those up last year. They were a huge hit. This barn sign lasts 6 months and they only cost $200. And every month we change the message. So you can see there's an over there. Thank you for fighting to put Pennsylvania workers first. Now next month it will say something about working families or prescription drug costs or things like that. So they change the message every month. And actually Mark Moss, where's Mark? Mark's not here anymore?
Mark leaves.
Did he leave? Anyway, he goes around.
Just came for pizza.
Oh, yeah. Wait, 4 pizzas are missing and Mark is not. I don't know. But anyways, he goes around and changes those messages every month. So these are excellent signs. They're on people's personal property, so they don't get abused the way some of the other signs do. And we put them on personal property in high visibility places. So we have 2 asks. One ask is, can you sponsor a sign or part of a sign? $200 to sponsor the sign for the whole 6 months. We have a group of people that are trying to go in together to sponsor a sign. So if 10 people did $20, that would work. And then the other ask is, if you have or know of somebody who has, there he is, there's Mark Moss, has a high visibility yard that you think they would be willing to put one of these signs up, we really want to get, she wants to have them a lot more places. Last year, I think we had 12. This year, we want to have 16 to 18, maybe even 20. We want them up in Carbon County. We want them at all the places where she is. We have a location in Copley, but think outside the box. Where would be a good place that you know that somebody might be willing to put one of these signs in their yard and email us or whatever. Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. So here's this big thing that we're planning, and I'm really excited about it. On June 22nd is the Rose Fest, which we always go to. We always have a table at. But this year, because it's the 2nd anniversary of Roe versus Wade being overturned that weekend, 2 years too long for women to be suffering, okay? Look, I made a math thing there. But we're gonna have a rally. We're gonna have a women's rally, women's march at the Rose Garden right after the Rose Fest in the big pavilion thing there. And we're gonna advertise the heck out of it, and we're gonna make it the who's who of all the elected officials. We're gonna get a lot of people to come scream and shout, and we're gonna let our feelings be known about this Roe versus Wade. Everybody's gotta know that there's only one way to vote in the fall in order to save women's rights, okay? And we're gonna make a big push for that this year. And I just wanted to let you know that it's on your calendar that everybody's picking up right now. But plan now to be involved in that however you can. You know, we're gonna have signs and chants and music, and it's gonna be a big deal. And we wanna make some noise and let them know that we are pissed off and we're not taking it anymore. All right, good. Okay. Also, ask for next Tuesday, November the 5th, ask off of work, okay? We need everybody at every polling location needs to be covered that day. So ask off work, November 5th, do it, you know, before the rush. Okay, so the secretary left the minutes in the back. We left the minutes in the back of the room. If you need them, you could have looked at them, but now you can't because we're already going to vote on it. So, all in favor, or somebody make a motion that we're going to accept the minutes. Nancy Mernon makes the motion to accept the minutes. Who's going to second it? Good job. John Schubert's going to second it. All right. Motion passed. Oh, wait. All in favor. Sorry. Don't give me any trouble. All right. Good job. All right. Now, Kim is in the back of the room. She's come to the front. Look at her walking to the front of the room. Look how excited. Yeah, that's true. They can't hear you on Zoom. This is Kim Shire, our treasurer. She's gonna give us a little report and also talk about how you can donate for the barn signs if you want. And here is Kim.
Hello, so our balance right now for the state PAC is $7,562.93. And for the federal PAC, we have $3,353.50. And it's the federal PAC that we're gonna use to pay for these signs. So if you wanted to contribute towards the big barn signs for Susan Wild, you write a check to Lehigh Valley for All Federal PAC. All right, and then if you can give it to me, but if it's easier for you to mail it off, that is P.O. Box 442, Bethlehem. That's 18016. Okay, so that's the one.
Okay, maybe you can put that address in the chat.
Yeah, put it in the chat.
P.O. Box 442.
Yeah, so we have, yeah, she's gonna repeat that, the
Okay,
address.
So it's P.O. Box 442.
I want everybody.
And Bethlehem, 18016.
P.O. Box 442.
Oh.
18016.
Two bucks for 1, 2.
Bethlehem 18416.
Lehigh Valley for All, actually, if you just do Lehigh Valley for All, that would be fine too. But you
Yeah.
can do federal PAC and actually don't.
So we have two PAC, we have an LLC,
Oh, you got it.
we have a state PAC, and we have a federal PAC. So like, we can't help Susan Wild with anything unless we're doing it from the federal PAC. And then we can't help, Aaron McClelland or whoever, unless we're doing that from the state PAC. So it's very confusing. I'm glad I'm not in charge of it, but, Steve can explain it to us later, right, Steve?
Sure.
Yeah, we can use the state PAC to help Stephanie raise this too. All right, and now we're gonna move on to the amazing events committee, and here. Jenny.
I'm so sorry you didn't bring us a show like I did. I have a terrible confession to make. And I've had to live with it for about 2 weeks now. I lost the list of people who signed up to bring food for May and June.
All right, it's not nearly as bad as I thought it was gonna be.
It was pretty bad. But we recovered, and I want to thank Cheryl Baker for bringing the wonderful pizzas tonight. And
Fratelli.
yes, for Telly's, and for Kathy and Sandy and me for bringing the side stuff. Next month, I put out a plea on our Facebook page. Did somebody sign up for June? Please help me, because I have no idea. And Gail Pruninger stepped forward. So thank you, Gail. But there should be another person to partner with her. Would anybody, could I interest anybody in partnering with Gail?
Yay.
We have Joan. Thank you so much. And I promise I will never do this again. I'll make other mistakes. And in June, we'll start again with a new list, because we're gonna need lots of food. There's an election coming. We need lots of food, right? Lots of food. And that's it. Right? So, thank you.
I thought she got caught naked in the fountain or something like that, so this is way better, I guess. But that's not a bad thing, that's right. Okay, oh yeah, I just wanted to let you know that over the course of the next few months, we're gonna be doing all these festivals and stuff like that. We'll be getting a lot of new volunteers. So we're gonna need everybody who's already very experienced and who knows how to canvas and do whatever else we're doing to take these people, help take these people under their wing. So expect when we have canvases or whatever is happening, that you're gonna help train all the new people and hopefully keep them very engaged so that we keep them, like we always do, after the election and into infinity and beyond after we're done. Okay, and Miriam, you want to just stand up and say a quick hi? Miriam is here, subby, and she won her race. Yeah.
Okay, come.
You should be on the mic.
Endorsement for all your.
Yeah, I think-
Appreciate it so much. It helped me so much in my campaign. I'm so grateful for all of you guys. We have a lot more work to do. So I'm gonna need all your help and we're gonna have to work together and we're gonna flip this seat.
More work to do, that's what they all say.
Kathy, Steve wants to say something.
Oh, Steve wants to say something. Okay, here comes Steve. Samuelson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am here to look at that. Joe and Kamala have something to say. Look at that. I just want to thank you. My goodness, I was on the ballot last week. I got renominated for another term here in the 135th district, so I'll have the opportunity in November to be on the ballot. We have a lot of races. I'm very proud of the Democratic Party. We have candidates in all 11 House seats. So think about this, there are 11 House seats in the Lehigh Valley. The Republicans have candidates in 5. They do not have candidates in my district, in Jeannie McNeil's district, in Josh Siegel's district, Schlossberg's district, in Pete Schreier's district, in Bob Freeman's district. And so the 6 of us will have a lot of time to help Susan Wild, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and wonderful people like Stephanie Rafis and Miriam Sabi. My goodness, we have outstanding candidates all across the Lehigh Valley. This is going to be a tough race in November for our presidential candidate, for Bob Casey, for Susan Wild, but we are going to win because we have the energy and we have the people, and you really know how to campaign. On a side note, I was helping my friend of 30 years, Bob Freeman, and I know that Lehigh Valley for All was all in for Bob Freeman. You helped him in Southside Easton, in Palmer, in Hellertown, in Freemansburg. I missed a couple places, but really appreciated. Bob had a good victory, an overwhelming victory, and he's unopposed in November. So Bob will also have time to help all of these other wonderful candidates. So thank you. It's an honor to serve in this as a member of the House, and I really appreciate all of your work to help me and the other candidates.
Yeah. And we appreciate you too, Stephen. We appreciate that you come all the time and keep us updated on what's going on. I can't thank you enough for all the grief you go through there to try to make sure that we have a good life here. So we appreciate your work and your thoughtfulness. So, okay. Before we start the program for immigration tonight, I just wanted to direct your attention to the back of the agenda where all the dates are, along with the card that we gave out. So please get all your family and friends and everybody together. The thing is, everybody's going to be on vacations during the summer, so we've got to all work together to try and make sure everything's covered for each other while we're gone to our fabulous vacations in the Bahamas and wherever else we're going. What? Where are you going? I want to go. Okay, so we sent out a little quiz along with our agenda, and the thing about immigration is that there's so much confusion, so much misinformation, and so many people who are getting everything they know about immigration from Fox News or whatever, or the talking points, or Donald Trump himself saying all this crazy stuff and it's not true. And so at this point, he's using it to try and get elected. And I think that when we go to doors, not just the doors of Republicans, but independents and Democrats are all completely confused about what's going on in our country with immigration. So I'm so grateful that we have 2 immigration lawyers here tonight, Katie Alvarelli and Dave Harrington, to explain it all. And we're going to go through these and then like some of the myths. And we have a written thing, and also Sergio if you could, at the end of, I'll give you these two sheets for you to put in, so the people on Zoom can go to these links and look at this stuff that we're gonna be talking about tonight. But it's really important for us. Our job is to get good information out to the public. And once they know the good information, it's a lot easier for them to vote in a way that is helpful to them and us and everyone. So really appreciative that you guys are here tonight. And I'm really appreciative that we have Dave and Katie. But we're gonna start with this quiz. Worried about immigrants overwhelming the US? Take our quiz by the Washington Post. Okay, so question number 1. What share of the United States population was born in a different country? Raise your hand if you think you know the answer. Nobody knows the answer. 14%, 24%, or 34%? 14. You're right. The answer is 14%. Question number 2. What share of all immigrants to the U.S. enter the country illegally? Is it 25, less than 25%, around 45%, or more than 55%? Less than 25%. You guys are so smart. In 2022, around 11% of the U.S. born population were living in poverty. What was this number for immigrants? Around 14, around 34, or around 54? It's A, around 14%. In 2019, American-born citizens got an average of $8,000 per person in welfare and other entitlements. What was the number for immigrants? 25% or less, about the same, or around 25% more? Yes, 25% less. They got 25% less of welfare and other entitlements than the average American-born citizen. Okay. Close to 3% of U.S. born men under 40 are incarcerated. What is that figure for foreign born men living in the U.S.? Around 1%, around 15%, or around 25%? Yes, very good, around 1%. So right there, that buffs a lot of the myths that people have about this. Now, a couple more things. Susan Wild recommended, did anybody pick up that article? Somebody took mine. The article that Susan Wild recommended, anybody have it?
Yep. I have it.
Yeah, the border one, Yeah, so that's one thing that Sergio can put, good, thank you. Sergio can put in the,
As soon as you tell
in the
Sergio what
chat.
it is.
Okay, thank you. It's time to fix the southern border. Susan Wild recommends that we all read this. It's from the Morning Call. And it's a really good article, it explains a lot. So make sure you get a chance to read that. And then the other thing we have that you can put in the chat too, Sergio, is the 10 myths about immigration.
Okay.
So one more thing I just want to recommend everybody read, but first take a Darvon. The Project 25, the Rights Dystopia Plan to Dismantle Civil Rights and What It Means for Women. Everybody read that, but only if you can take it. Only if you have the strength. But that's what their plan is if Trump gets elected, so yeah. All right, now without further ado, Dave and Katie, we're gonna have Dave and Katie show. And they're gonna come up here and we're going to have them dispel the 10 myths about, look, they're not even walking up here. They're just like, no, we don't wanna. Yeah, wave to the crowd, Okay, hey, everybody. This one's Dave and this one's Katie.
All right, so most of you probably don't know me. I'm Dave Harrington. But this is my law partner, Katie. She was doing math and I was in like theater and stuff like that. So I don't know if this is but we recently have a law firm together in Allentown. So it's Auberelli and Harrington. We're on 7th Street. And we almost exclusively do immigration law. So we are glad to be here tonight. I mean, this is sort of nerds on immigration law, on policy, as well as on procedure, anything like that. You want to ask me how to get somebody from here to there? I could probably give you 3 different ways. You want to ask me what are some of the push and pull factors in immigration? We probably know that as well. So what we want to do is kind of give you guys what you want. So we could probably talk about immigration for hours, days, and sometimes we do. Some of those hearings seem like they're days, but they're only a couple hours. So without anything else, I want to jump right into it. Thank you guys all for having us here.
In this sheet about 10 minutes of immigration, it's actually when you're talking to, immigration voters or students like that. And there was stuff here that they say, but then these guys.
Kathy, talking to the mic.
So the first myth is that most immigrants are here illegally. Most immigrants in America are here illegally.
So I think just from a pure numerical standard, that would not be the case, right? We have so many folks that are going through the system, they're getting their visas because they have immediate relatives in the United States. So that's a child petitioning you that's over 21, that would be a parent petitioning you, that would be a spouse petitioning you, from all different walks of life across the world. That I think mathematically there would be no way, like we would have to import the entire population of Central America to like get even close to where that number would be annually. And I think the other thing that you could note on there is a lot of times where there is someone that could be considered here illegally, they would otherwise have a path towards citizenship if not for some of the artificial hurdles that have been put in place by people that wanted to punish immigration in the United States. So if we want to, we could talk about the waiver program and how difficult that is. We could, I don't want to eat up the whole thing on that.
Even if you're talking about people with lawful entries who overstay the visa, right? That technically counts as somebody who is unlawfully present in the United States, or what most people are referring to as illegal immigrants. The visas are expiring while people are in the middle of legalizing their status. And so all of these numbers are getting commingled and jumbled together in a way that's very unfair towards people who have lawfully entered the United States, or who are processing. When you hear why can't they just do it legally? Well, we've set up huge barriers. Dave was just talking to you about the visa bulletin, which is when family members are filing for relatives outside the United States. An additional fact for that is that there's millions of people in those queues, and the queues can be anywhere from 1 year to 24 years if you're from the Philippines or Mexico. So that wait times for lawful entry into the United States to be reunified with your families, which is one of the stated purposes of immigration law, are incredibly long, decades. And then there are other factors in the middle of that are inhibiting the process as well.
So one of the big things is if you came to the United States without a visa, or what we call an EWI, an entry without inspection, what the right would probably call, an illegal entry or illegal immigration, you have to depart the United States in order to get your status. So it's not as simple as just getting married to a United States citizen and getting that green card. You have to leave the United States. And that's a process that can be relatively streamlined. You go to the consulate of your home country, you can get everything done. But in the late 90s, they introduced a piece of legislation that made it so you had to wait 10 years outside the United States before you could come back in and see your family. So when you go to an attorney and you say, hey, I'm married to someone, or I have a son who's 21 years old, he wants to petition me, I've been here for 30 years, you have to tell them, for a spouse, there might be something we can do. For a son or daughter, there's not going to be much we can do unless you want to wait outside for 10 years. So the system is set up to discourage people from doing it, quote unquote, the right way, right? And that is something that is in place that Congress could change overnight and make it so that anyone who is probably at least 1 million people or something like that around that would be able to then get their status, get their paperwork, and quote unquote don't do it the right way. And it's something that is well within our reasonable laws to do. And it's not as far back of a law as you think. It's from, I mean, I guess it's from about 30 years ago at this point, but still, it's something that's changeable through Congress.
There you go.
So even people who are trying to expedite their process and wait it out within the United States, filing waivers for their unlawful presence. So you can wait one unlawful entry into the United States. But even the requirements for that, we have to show an extreme level of hardship to certain very limited qualifying relatives in the United States, which is really a spouse or parent who's a citizen or resident. But the waiver processing time is 4 years. So even before you can get to the point of waiting for your interview abroad, you have to wait another 4 years. So realistically, we're putting people into a situation where it's just either 4 years or 10 years. Either way, these are artificial barriers. It used to be, so 10 years ago, the processing times for the waivers Dave was talking about were 8 months. Then 5 years ago, in the middle of a different administration, the wait times just ballooned to 4.5 years, and they haven't come back down since. Part of that's due to COVID, but the wait times were expanding well before COVID. So now the waits are so out of control, there's almost no way beyond hiring, what did they say, 60 to 70 new, just for 601s, they would have to allocate 60 to 70 new.
Hang on, let me get the cookies, I'll take you out.
Keep going. Keep going.
I think you did see a hand raised at someone. Go ahead.
Yeah. My question would be, if
Right. So,
it's gone through and bipartisan bill passed, would it have helped have all
hurry up.
added? Would it help you delay that?
So certainly it would, right? We have a shortage of adjudicating officers in immigration. We have a shortage of immigration judges. I always tell my clients it's going to be about 4 years before they get a chance to go and see a judge. I just recently had a hearing back in like the winter for someone that had started their case in 2018. So they started their case and it was 6 years, and now we won the first preliminary part. Now we're in the next part, and you have folks that are potentially facing these huge slogs. I mean, we have people that have been waiting decades to get the relief that they seek because it's just taking so long. The process is backlogged, or worse, you have people that have to wait for these visas to become current, and they're like, it's like, okay, it's gonna be 3 years until the visa is current, and then the next thing you know, the next month comes out. And they say, hey, actually, this was oversubscribed last time around, so it's going to be another 4 years now. And then it's these delays upon delays, and the visas, it has to do with congressional prescriptions, but the adjudicative time frame has everything to do with funding. It has everything to do with the fact that there has been a concerted effort from the purse strings of our country to prevent immigration from being efficiently addressed in the United States.
Another place to
Stupid question. When you're people, you're talking about very dull process. When we see that it's once in all the stuff we can stop.
Sure.
It's probably the one piece that has not expired. It's something else, So the legal and going back.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I could address the nuance of it. I mean, obviously, if you take a half to it and you just say illegal, right? You can paint a broad stroke in order to demonize a subsect of our country. There are several nuances. So in the term of art is entry without inspection for someone who has come through. That just means that they have not gone through the prescribed legal rigors that someone else that came in on a, say, tourist visa would go through. It doesn't mean that they're not being encountered by the Customs and Border Protection. And in fact, the way that it's set up, and we see this, right, is that there are, I don't know, maybe half a dozen spots along the US border that a majority of folks are going through. And there are Customs and Border Patrol, or sorry, Customs and Border Protection agents right there that go ahead and just take them in, they process them, they take fingerprints, they take a photo. In order to be released, you need to provide an address, and then you're placed immediately into deportation proceedings. And you're told from the start, you are on the defensive here.
We've also picked up on one of the more controversial components of immigration, which is whether these individuals are actually unlawfully entering. And as a technical matter, the answer is yes. The minute you cross the border, before you get to the inspection station, whether you're encountered, apprehended or not, you've already executed unlawful entry. However, it is not unlawful to file for asylum in the United States. In point of fact, it's a prescribed remedy. It's a prescribed form of relief for people seeking, their fear of persecution. And so there's this debate boiling about, are these folks unlawful entrants? Are they asylum seekers? And what do we do with these individuals? And frankly, the federal government has fully mishandled it, I think. And that also goes to your point about the shortage of officers. The government itself has stated that there's a critical shortage of asylum officers, and they are specially trained. They're outside the standard adjudications officers to address these issues at the border. So we know that, and it's compounding the problem. But that in and of itself is a debate within immigration law. How are we categorizing undocumented folks?
My question is this: we see on television, and I speak to my grandmother, in a very busy tents, undocumented people in the streets. People don't feel safe to live in this island. This is what people are being shown. This is the picture. And I'm hearing what you're saying, and I don't even I do definitely don't see the connection between what you're saying. And all these people who've been bused to Chicago are taking up street space, daily, they're dangerous. In many cases, they're very dangerous because they have no way of reaching. How do we change that misconception? Because this curve is also
So yeah, I think one of the things that, again, when we talk about these artificial barriers is if we've seen a lot of influx from places like Guinea, like Venezuela, like Haiti. Venezuela was in the midst of almost a cold civil war. They had two dueling presidents, and that caused a lot of strife and tension. And you have folks who are being displaced by that, right? And they just need to get out. Haiti's the same way. I mean, they basically have gangs that took over the country, and they're just going neighborhood to neighborhood claiming turf. And then we had a coup that happened in Guinea with widespread violence there recently, and you see this around the world. So there are people who just need to get out, right? And then they come up to the United States and they're applying for asylum. We've helped a ton of people who were in political opposition parties, who were members of particular social groups that were being persecuted, with the ethnicities that they're saying, oh, these people are subhuman, now we're going to go after them, and they need to leave. What happens when you get to the United States is you are required to file for asylum and then wait 6 months before you can apply for work authorization, which means that for 6 months, it is unlawful for someone to employ you. So it's not that they don't have money because they don't want to work, it's that they don't have money because the United States has said you cannot work here. I gotta say, all of our clients say, please, how can I get work authorization as soon as I can? And so the problem is that for folks who want to paint those pictures, right? They want people to see this and then be worried about it, like the Governor Abbotts and everybody. They will round up folks and send them to a location where they know there aren't enough social services available, where they know these folks are not going to be able to connect with jobs for at least 6 months on a perfect day. And then they're left with these straining social services, and it paints this picture, which is 100% curable if we would just allow for these artificial barriers to go away. I think one of the other things to talk about is a lot of the hyper focus that goes on is whenever someone in these groups either commits a violent crime or, takes property or something like that, and I think you have to address, yeah, we're not saying every single person here is an angel coming in, but by and large, these are families. These are children, these are women that have faced violence. These are people that have seen family members killed by gangs. They have a strong aversion to crimes and to gangs. And the fact well, and especially during Trump, the fact that there was so much chaos at the border without this order makes it so that everybody is facing the same scrutiny, whether you are a 3-year-old child or somebody who may have a criminal record, right? Trump set aside all of the enforcement policies. Biden brought it back and said, no, we're not going to go after moms and dads, little kids. We're not going to go after people who don't have any criminal records. They're still going after people that have the criminal records. They're still, if they weren't enforcing it, I mean, we wouldn't have, any of the jobs that we do. So it is still out there, but the thing is they're on the right, and I mean, I don't want to like polarize it. I don't know if we're allowed to. Who's going to yell at me? Yeah. Okay, great. So those on the right will find the 0.001% of that group that's in camp somewhere. They won't tell you how they got there. They won't tell you why they don't have jobs. People are here, they don't have jobs, and look, 2 of them went out and robbed somebody, right? And oh, yeah, so they do at the border, you are getting fingerprinted. They are running it through background checks. If you've been here before, if you have a criminal hit on your record, you're either, if you've been here before and you've been deported, you are then having your deportation reinstated without the need of any formal hearings unless you are saying like, hey, something has changed in my country. Or you're placed into expedited removal hearings, which they basically turn you right around there. I do know what you're talking about, right? And I've seen the commercials on TV, and
Yeah, I got it.
we all know the commercial that we're talking about. We all know those images on TV. I probably don't. It's kind of like the MAGA pack people, right? So they hyper focus on this one incident. So the first thing to note is anyone that's seen it, the Biden administration, if that person had been known to do that, they're going to go after that person, right? They haven't disbanded ICE. They haven't said, do whatever you want, right? What they've now said is ICE isn't going to show up to an elementary school and take a kid out, that's 6 years old that's here without status, but that is conflated with these 1 or 2 small, hyper-focused groups, and it's also the same thing that has been happening with propaganda for time immemorial. There was, and I hate to do like it's an ad Hitler or whatever it is, but during Nazi Germany, they would hyper-focus on crimes of Jewish people, and regardless of how small the population was, it was in the newspaper because it was meant to incense you and to make you associate a certain group of people with certain actions.
In point of fact, one of the myths you were talking about was the level of criminality. Sorry, one of the myths you were talking about was the level of criminality within new American communities. One additional thing to note is that even that level of criminality is false because 40% of the crimes that people are placed into criminal proceedings for involve unlawful reentry, which really should be a civil administrative violation and not a crime, but it's classified as a federal crime. And so you're basically able to wipe out another 40% of those people. So the statistic will actually lower even further. Additionally, at every step of immigration, every time we do something, we trigger another background check. Fingerprints over and over again. Every year people are being, the same people over and over again, every year fingerprinted. Every application we file, there are fingerprints. If there are criminal hits in the background, the entire posture of the case changes, and so the relief becomes tighter and tighter and tighter, and it becomes harder and harder to remain in the United States. And so this notion that people are just walking around committing crimes unchecked, it's ridiculous. Like, we know where these individuals are. There are programs designed to go through the criminal justice system and look for specific people for specific types of crimes, fraud-related offenses, social service abuse offenses, violent crimes. I mean, there's all different types of programs that are used to screen in coordination with counties, with states, with other branches of the federal government, agencies, excuse me. So this idea that people are just walking around and there's no restriction, no understanding, it's just not true. I would say there's extremely heightened screening.
There is, and I think one of the other things is a lot of these programs, so things like TPS, which is a temporary protected status, that is what's being afforded to certain groups of Venezuelans right now, which I believe that the right's probably opposed to. Anything on that, any criminal hit on that, and you're done. I mean, like that's it. Even things like DACA. DACA, it could be as simple as a DUI. You could lose your DACA. I mean, that's DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It was a program that Obama instated after a gridlock in Congress over immigration reform that allowed for, it's Dreamers, yeah. So it allows for children who came here as minors, who have been here for a certain amount of time and either served in the military or had an education, who qualified for status. It doesn't lead to citizenship. It back and forth on whether or not you could even travel outside the United States with it and things like that. But anything as simple as a DUI can land you into removal proceedings from there. So there is a heightened scrutiny. There is more security on this. The other thing I want to point, there's a screen to it, right? And even if the screen is, what do we have, that 3-year-old at one time that they thought committed murder or something like that? Because the name was similar to someone. It took us, kid wasn't born until 2015, so I don't know how they could have done it. But there's, it's a time machine. But there is another aspect of this for folks who want to come in that is called administrative processing. Administrative processing is applying to people who are coming from conflict zones or from zones that have known ties to terrorist groups. And it is an extra step in order to come to the United States, where they use their vast network of, security apparatus to make sure that you are who you are and you're not connected with anything. And it's so almost draconian that people that are just someone's grandma can get caught up in it because their name is common enough that somebody 20 years ago was caught saying something that, that the NSA had. I always tell my clients, like, this is the same government that found Osama bin Laden. They're gonna know that you got 2 DUIs. You know what I mean? Like it's there, right? You're in the system. So I think if you do encounter someone that has those fears, the first thing to note is, are you worried about them being in encampments? Because I am too. I don't want them to be in those tents. I want them to be able to get a job. I want them to be able to have an apartment with their family where they feel safe, right? So I think that's the first thing is, if that's what you're worried about, I'm worried about that too. You might be worried about it because it looks unsightly. I'm worried about it from a humanitarian perspective. But either way, we can accomplish our goal by getting rid of these artificial barriers for them to work in the United States. And then I think the other thing you could point out is that how very low this actual crime rate is, now hyper-focused people who are opposed to immigration are on it. I mean, you have to dispel some of the fear that comes with it too, because it takes a lot to trust a stranger, right? It takes a lot to welcome somebody that you don't know. But that's the sort of bravery that, America has been built on. So it's one of the nice things to say. I want to try to go in order of whose hands were up. You've had your hand up a while. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you made so many great points, including that just focus.
Just so that the Zoom people could hear you. You made so many great points, and yes, I mean, the whole MAGA and Trump thing was born out of anti-immigration and racism, and we have to remember that. I think we all mostly know that. One thing, when we talk about tents on the sidewalks, I know that it's horrible that Texas and Florida has been sending people to other areas. But if you go to any major city in the last 15 years, you will see a growing tent of of Americans of all kinds who are living on the streets. It's not just people from other countries, and we don't really want to acknowledge the poverty and the income inequality in this country. But, you know, so if somebody says, well, yeah, you know, there are immigrants living on the streets, so are a lot of others, and actually most of the violence in this country is committed by people who have been living here for a long time.
And one of the things, sort of even outside of immigration, is that a lot of the violence that you see coming out of inner cities is an insular group. It's people in a specific group committing violence against other people in that group because of systemic issues of poverty and of an carceral system that separates families and of an education system that is based on local tax bases, so that if you are in an impoverished neighborhood, you don't get the quality education. So when you hear Fox News wants to make it seem like a criminal is going to go into your neighborhood and just randomly start shooting people, right? But the opposite is true when you talk to law enforcement, when you talk to prosecutors and everything like that, is that it's an insular group of folks that are doing this to each other, and it's because of external factors that have been brought into there over the course of centuries, really. So that's another thing to point out, is that the people in those tents are much more likely to be victims of crime than you are, because they don't have the protections that you do. They don't have the communities that you do. They don't have, and that's another thing. Actually, I'm going off on a tangent. One of the things that they started to do when you talk about sanctuary cities, right? And that's a buzzword. What the policy actually is that local police will not inquire into your immigration status when taking police reports, when protecting you from abuse. Right. And what it does is it encourages people who are undocumented to report those crimes. If you saw someone get mugged, but you knew if you talked to the police, they were going to call ICE and then you were going to be ripped away from your family, you would be less inclined to make that report to the police. And again, the animosity towards it may be because that is what the people who are opposed to sanctuary cities want. They want people to live in fear if they're not here with the proper documentation. If you haven't filed your I-864 along with your I-485, you're out. You know what I mean? Like, those are the technicalities that get people caught up. And so a really good point to be made is, if you are worried about crime, you want to make sure you're encouraging as many folks in these communities to speak out. And the way you do trust, the way you do that is by letting them know that if you do come out and make a report, it's not going to end up with you back on a plane, right? That's another thing you could bring up with folks who are worried about that.
So I'm going to let Lucy ask a question.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're here. As a first generation American, I am from immigrant parents and going through the process. I even assisted family members on how to become U.S. citizens. The big thing, which I love what she said about the racial issue about immigration. People forget there are people from Europe, there are people from other places that are doing the same thing, but the spotlight isn't held on them. And that always kind of gets under my skin, because I know, for instance, the Pocono Mountains, they have a lot of folks that work in some of those hospitality centers that are illegal also. And they're not from South America, the Caribbean, Haiti, or whatever. And they don't look like me.
Dave, would you want to just real quickly tell? Yeah.
I could actually, I think you're absolutely correct. And the way that before COVID, I used to do a couple immigration talks here and there. And the way that I always started off was from that perspective, in that there's two unique perspectives of it. In the early United States, there was really no immigration regulations, right? The first instance of immigration regulations was to exclude individuals from coming to the United States, setting capita, setting full bars against people coming in from a racist perspective. One of the odd things about that is, at that same time, they were forcing people against their will to come to the United States as slaves, right? But they were dehumanizing both people by doing that. And as we've seen the horrors of things like slavery and like the 20th century, like the Holocaust and like the wars that are happening, we saw a perspective, people like us saw a perspective of, we need to make sure that we're doing a humanitarian system that helps people come in, that isn't being, is trying not to push people from here and there and say, you're allowed in, but you're not a person. You're not allowed in at all, right? But those things still exist today. There are country quotas. So if you are from India, China, Mexico, or the Philippines, you are treated differently in immigration than if you're from somewhere else. If you are from Europe, you can qualify for what's called an ESTA, which means you don't need a tourist visa in order to come in. Whereas if you're from most other places in the world, except for, I think Japan and South Korea and stuff like that, you have to go through a rigorous process. And let me tell you, the process can be as curt as, thank you for your documentation, we're denying your visa today, have a good day. And I've had clients that I've said, prep, like, okay, they're gonna ask me about this, they're gonna ask me about that, and they come back, they said, they didn't ask me anything. All they looked at my documents, they asked me, have you ever been to the United States? I said no, and they said, well, you're not going today, right? That person wasn't from Europe, And so that is a very good perspective to have, is that there is a system of injustice that is within the system of immigration.
Modern immigration law is codified on the basis of what were known as the Chinese exclusion cases. That's what we would know them as immigration lawyers. And it was literally a set of cases. So Congress has plenary authority to act on immigration, meaning they have broad authority to do whatever they want with immigration. And basically what they said was, we're going to discriminate on the basis of national origin, color, and language. And that was the basis of the Chinese exclusion cases. And that has basically been codified into current immigration law in all the ways that Dave was just talking about and more. But I mean, it's plain as day what are the underpinnings of immigration. And to your point, one of the country groups with the highest level of overstays in the United States is actually Canada. But nobody ever talks about that because we all know why. I mean, Canadians look like me, you know what I'm saying? So that's what it comes down to. And so you go from the Chinese exclusion cases to ignoring who is overstaying in the United States, to painting these very extreme pictures of who is entering the United States unlawfully and what that term even means. And that's your recipe right there. So,
Dave, real quickly, let's just move on to this one other myth. We can keep asking questions, but another thing that they always say is, that these illegal immigrants are taking our good American jobs. And I want you to explain to people what kind of jobs your clients are taking.
Well, there's two things, right? So I think first is, that is like a hatchet being taken to the very delicate topic. There is this sort of idea of a monolithic immigrant that is just one group that's, coming in and doing whatnot. There are two facets to the employment side of immigration. The first one is for very high skilled workers. So these are people who are coming to the United States and taking good jobs. It is required by the Department of Labor that you prove through a very rigorous process that takes upwards of 3 years at this point, that no American job is going to be displaced because of this person coming in. It's called a labor certification. And the labor certification requires somebody to prove A, that they're paying this person what their prevailing wage is, B, that this person meets those qualifications, and C, they have to run a recruitment effort for 30 days and then have it up for another 30 days before they'll even grant you the ability to come into the United States. So in that time, they have to hold interviews, they have to advertise their prevailing wage, they have to take up resumes, and if somebody meets those requirements, they are required by law to hire them before they hire the person coming in. So when people say immigrants are taking the good American jobs, if the job is good, probably because Americans didn't want to do it, right? There's people that are very highly qualified that are willing to go for the job that's there, and no other Americans wanted to fill that spot as prescribed by law. And so by the time these folks come in, they are usually leading scientists or technicians or doctors from their area of the world. They have gone through a very rigorous process to show that I'm, willing to work at the same rate as any other American does, but I have better qualifications, or this job is more, keen on what I can do. And it's a system that brings in doctors to places that have doctor shortages. There is a waiver, it's called a Conrad waiver, that allows for certain doctors to come in and go into low economic areas and provide essential services. It allows for people who have, advanced degrees, that have masters and that are physicists and chemists, to come in and be here to do the jobs that we need. But it's a very rigorous process to do. And so that's the first myth to dispel, is that they're coming in and taking these good jobs. Because if they are getting those good jobs, it's because they work pretty damn hard to get that position, right?
How about the mushroom thing?
Well, that's the second thing to note, is in this area around here, from what we've seen with our clients, the two biggest employers, besides like little back of the room, doing dishes for $3 an hour or something like that, are slaughterhouses and mushroom farms. And you guys are probably all familiar with the slaughterhouse. If you don't know how they grow mushrooms, it's a big warehouse with cow manure on the floor, and the mushrooms grow, and you go in there in the dark and you pick the mushrooms up, and then they give you $50 a day to do that, right? So those are the people who, you can have that job if you want. I'm sure they'll offer it to you. But that is part of the other aspect of it. But I don't want to say that in a way that makes it as if the people are choosing to do that job. They're doing that job because no one else wants to do it. And employers know that if they don't have status, they're not going to be able to do anything about it, right? So I guess I said two, but really three. The third thing, if you're talking about immigrants taking jobs, folks aren't coming up right from the Mexican border and walking up and shaking hands with a manager and saying, I'm going to work here. And they're like, let me see your resume. Da-da. No, it's employers who are taking advantage of the mess of immigration to hire people that don't have work authorization so they can pay them $3 an hour. It is those that control the means of production that are actually exploiting these people in order to lower their ability to get paid and all that. So if you want to talk about who's to blame, it's more so the Koch brothers than it is, anyone else that's making these policies.
So on that, a similar thought there, if you had a crystal ball, perhaps, and you could look into the future, is it realistic that this country is going to actually see immigration reform based on how the economy relies on people entering illegally to keep the economy moving? Is this realistic that this is going to ever happen, or kind of just wondering?
No, that's a solid point, right? The system that is in place right now benefits people who want economic exploitation, because they can have all these folks that are coming in, they can deny them work authorization, they can throw up again these artificial barriers. But that's the same for anything else. That's the same. Is it realistic to get money out of politics? Is it realistic to get fair districts, right? Is it realistic to have Congress vote? And it really has to do with changing how the system is going right now. We can really only do that through like very large organizational efforts, because the people who are, well, it's like the Tyson chicken plant that had a couple thousand folks who were in there, and that usually what happens in that is someone says, hey, we won't check your documents, or we'll even write you false documents so you can work here, but you're going to take $3 an hour. You're not going to complain when somebody's finger gets chopped off in the machine. And then what happens is we have a system that's set up. It does punish the employer, but they take a fine, right? And the fine is usually disproportionate to what they're going to do. And instead, the people who are punished are those that are working there in those conditions, because then they're rounded up by ICE, especially under Trump. They're rounded up by ICE, they're placed in removal proceedings. And then the next batch of people that come in because he has his border agents, arresting toddlers instead of going after other folks, like they come in and then they're exploited again as well. So in order is it realistic? I don't want to say no, because I don't want to put out that spark, right? But it's gonna take a lot because it's money interests. It's donors who say, yeah, don't vote for immigration reform.
All right, Jeannie's got a question.
Yeah, we have some good questions.
I have a slightly different question. So I work in education, and I've worked with people that get angry because they say, I came into the country the right way, and I resent people that come in incorrectly. I don't like to say illegal because people can't be illegal, but I don't know how to answer that. And these are people that work in education and who vote against their own interests because they don't want to support people coming in the wrong way. What do I say to them?
I would say that I think someone should take, it's a complex process, and someone should take pride in their ability to navigate it, right? And to get the documents filed and to bring family here. And I don't think you want to diminish the work they did. But I don't think that person would say, I want the system to be more complex. I don't think someone that came here, the right way would ever shy away from it being easier to come here the right way, or to not have to wait away from their family for those 10 years. And that is something that is available, right? And if we really want to get down to it, if we made it easier or shorter for someone who meets the criteria to come in, we might be able to reduce some of that resentment, because we get the same thing all the time. We get people, well, they're just letting people in over the border. And the other thing to know is that those people coming in over the border, they're placed immediately into deportation proceedings. Yep. So they're automatically on the defensive. Whereas if you come in on a visa, then you can get your status adjusted, you can go through and get family. So there are benefits for what we call a procedurally lawful entry, right? So that's the lawyer term for it. But the way that I would normally address that with people is, well, wouldn't you like it if it had been cheaper or easier or faster for you to get in? I don't know anybody that said, no, I wish maybe someone hates their spouse, but I don't know anyone that's like, no, I wish it would have taken longer for me to get in, right? So you need to address, because that is a very human thing, to see your hard work and to see someone else and you think, well, they got away with it and I had to do this. I think the other aspect of that is the same as anything in life. You want a better future for your kids. If you don't say, I'm not going to put the brakes on the train because it's already run over 2 people and that's unfair to them to stop it from hitting the 4 people up front, right? You make sure that you take care of those that are in the path of harm, and you address the reason why that harm had occurred in the past. And I think that's really important because it reframes the perspective from well, I did it the right way, why aren't they doing it the right way too? Well, why are you so mad about doing it the right way, right? Because it was frustrating, because it took a long time, because it was expensive, because fees just went up 26% in April. So people who were about to pay $500 are now paying $700. You know what I mean? So that's what we try to do. I had a client just the other day that was like, they're petitioning family. They're like, I'm going to vote for Trump. And I'm like, it's going to be hard for your family to come in then. And they were like, I know, but you'll figure it out, Dave. I'm like, well, yeah, I'll figure it out. But, you got to think of it from a broader perspective, which is, it's going to cost, I'll figure it out. It's going to cost you another $2,000, right? So it'll be less expensive if Trump's not in for you. Yeah, I'm going to save you some money. Go for Biden. You know what I mean? So those are the perspectives that I get. Is first, wouldn't you want it to be easier for you? Wouldn't you not want to have to wait 7 years for the visa to become current? Wouldn't that have been better? Yeah, it would have. And then also, yeah, there's been injustices in the past. It doesn't mean that we don't prevent them from happening to other people. Right. So it's hard. It's a hard mindset, but that's how I would address it. It's you have to connect with them on it.
All right, so we have 2 more questions that I really want to get to, and then after that, we can just ask questions, or I just want to throw these out there and you can answer them. The first one is that undocumented immigrants don't pay taxes, and so they're a burden on the national economy. And the second one is we could stop undocumented immigrants coming if we would just build the damn wall. So those are the 2 myths that I still want to bust before you go. So want to start with taxes?
For the love of God, everybody who works in the United States and makes more than a very small amount of money is required as a matter of law to pay taxes. That includes every single person who has entered the United States, regardless of the manner of entry. They pay taxes. We help people get tax ID numbers all the time. It is required as a matter of federal law. The IRS does it all the time. There's forms for it. There's an established procedure for it. You give your passport in, they send you a tax ID number. It is such a ridiculous statement. Dave is much more diplomatic than I am. I'm old and annoyed. And in point of fact, those taxes are used to fund federal programs, like social benefits. Correct, exactly, yes. So that is a complete mischaracterization of, it's just wrong. Everybody's required to pay taxes. And in point of fact, the IRS, I don't know if the policy is written anymore. Up until Trump was in office, there was an actual written policy that the IRS and well, Social Security was a little different, but the IRS would not report anybody to immigration, regardless of their immigration status, because they wanted their money. We've been broke how many times? They want their money. The Social Security Administration would go after people only when there was a problem with the number matching somebody else's identity, or there appeared to be something amiss with the number. But by and large, they want their money. So yes, people have to pay their taxes. That's it. That's the bottom line.
Well, address how some people in this country get away with not paying their taxes too.
Well, I was going to say, if you're really upset with who's not paying taxes, let's look at the billionaires, right? Like those are the people who are, if Elon Musk is paying a lower effective tax rate than a school teacher, right? And they have the accountants that are going to be able to hide all the money. Oh, that was a capital loss. We're not going to have to charge that. That was a business expense. My God, that was a business expense, right? That's the real tax evasion. And I mean, if you also want to talk more so on that, it's the corporations that are underpaying their folks so that they have to go onto these social welfare nets after working a 40-hour week, a 50-hour week, a 60-hour week, because they aren't paying the living wage. And so that's, if you really want to talk about who's paying and who's not paying taxes, that's a big thing. The other thing to note is that even if they aren't working, they're paying taxes whenever they make a purchase. In Pennsylvania, we have a 6% sales tax on non-essentials. So they're going out for a restaurant for dinner, they're going out for a movie or something like that. And they're not like, I think groceries is exempt, but if they're, any of those purchases are taxed. If they're renting, their landlord is charging them the property taxes. And so those property taxes are going to the schools, they're going to the local municipalities. And you don't need, and again, as Katie brought up, you get an ITIN, that's the individual tax ID number, and you can put that on things. And I think the final thing that I want to say is it's hard to collect taxes from someone when you don't afford them a Social Security number, because Social Security numbers are associated with work authorization. And again, you have to wait those 6 months on asylum in order to get your work authorization. So that's where the tax part is. And then to the point of the dragging on the social nets, first of all, there are so many federal programs that those that do not have status don't qualify for. You cannot apply for certain things. But the second aspect of it is, with better economic conditions for folks, they wouldn't have to rely on those because they would be able to provide for their family after working 60 hours, 50 hours a week, something like that. You've been so patient. I want to go ahead.
You made so many good points. You answered a lot of questions, but I did say there's one immigrant who doesn't pay taxes, and that's Elon Musk, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Well, and that's also, the way the tax code is set up is, I mean, the tax code is its own thing. I mean, I'm not a tax attorney, so I can't give legal advice on taxes, but I am someone who's pretty mad about the tax code, where you can, an effective rate for somebody who is doing things like Elon Musk is doing is lower than a school teacher. I mean, that's, my effective rate, but my wife went part-time this last year to take care of our son. And so our family made less. We ended up paying more at the end of the year in taxes because of some weird wizard magic that I don't understand. Because I paid a guy $100 to do our tax returns, and he did a good job. And I know, shout out to him if he's listening. But it wasn't a $10,000 an hour, tax evader accountant. Wasn't those Enron accountants, but sorry, this is turning into a stand-up bit now. So you hear about Enron? No.
Let's hear it for the old and annoyed though. The old and annoyed. All right, address the wall. Somebody please. Oh, wait. Oh, okay.
One of the things that I have difficulty.
Wait.
One of the things that I think makes it difficult to speak to people is the vocabulary. You are using words like visas, waivers, asylum. Like, I don't know what all of those words mean. What could you suggest that we do to educate ourselves better to understand the vocabulary so we can speak to people?
Well, I also think that people are not going to understand that vocabulary either. So we need to like put it down into some more terms.
USCIS's website.
Yeah, they've tried to modernize and categorize, I think, there. But I agree with you. I think immigration is designed to be difficult. It's designed to be complicated. It's an intentional thing that they're doing. It's structured in a way, it's very compartmentalized. I'm not sure, I mean, there's the policy component of it, and then there's what we actually do, and they really don't overlap. 90% of what people are talking about is just straight lies, and so it's very hard to combat that with legal crap because people don't realize what we're actually doing, what our clients are actually doing. There's Fox News land, and then there's the reality of the situation. And I sound like I'm mocking people, and frankly I am, but also it's the truth. I mean, there's just really very little connection between the practical reality of immigration law and what people are seeing. And I think that is one of our biggest challenges. And I think it's one of our biggest frustrations. People ask us to speak, and it's like, yeah, we don't know where to start sometimes. So
let me just ask you this. I had a question from here, and it's a good question. So an undocumented person is only a person who came through without stopping at the border to register themselves, or they came through on a visa that now is expired and they haven't done anything about it. Who's undocumented?
So that's part of it. So many people would say, all these individuals applying for asylum when they're crossing the border are also undocumented immigrants. We would not say that. We would not refer to these people as such. We would refer to them as asylum seekers, which is a lawful pathway in the United States. But people throw the terms around, and there are no generally accepted definitions because at law, those terms don't exist. So it's I don't even know how to get around that problem sometimes.
So I guess
I don't know. I mean, Katie and I both do this, but we try to explain to our clients what the process is, which a lot of attorneys don't. A lot of attorneys say, just shut up and let me do it, and then I'll let you know how it went. So one of the things that I've always found is you want to try to describe what it is. So asylum is someone who is fleeing persecution or violence in their country. Someone who, the classic examples are like religious persecution. So when the Iranian Revolution happened, and then people had to flee that were opposed to it. The Soviet Union had a lot of folks that were fleeing from that persecution. And in modern days, like you have a lot of folks who are in the LGBTQ community who are fleeing these places because there's a lot of that. That's an asylum seeker. That is someone who is within the realm of international law and codified, which means written into our law, a path that's allowable. You cannot apply for asylum outside the United States. It's not how the law works. You need to be in the United States to apply for asylum. And so when someone is on one side of the border, they do not meet the minimum qualification for asylum. They must cross the border in order to get in. So it's a procedure that is prescribed by law, and that there is a huge amount of case law on that. But the genesis of it came from after World War II. We saw the atrocities of what happens when you turn away people who are fleeing religious persecution, and we said we're not going to let that happen again. And it didn't take too long for us to forget that that's what happens when you turn people away. And and so an asylum seeker has very rigorous requirements, and it is a very difficult thing to get. But if you want to explain asylum to someone who's like, well, what they're just trying to come in and cross the border, say, well, they have to in order to qualify for it. It is part of the law, and it's part of the law that they do qualify for it if they can meet these standards. And it comes out of the horrors that we saw in the mid 20th century of the mass genocides, of the mass graves, and those are still happening in a lot of parts of the world today. So that, I mean, that's a perspective to put on and try to explain it.
Is asylum seeker versus people across the river and the razor wire. Because the ads that come out are not about the asylum seekers. They're about people that are doing something illegal.
Can you repeat the first part? We didn't.
Of immigration at our southern border, or however you want to put it, what proportion are asylum seekers versus people who are, so I'm still confused about what illegal entry is. Because once they come in, they get fingerprinted, you do the background check, they can get a tax ID. Are all those people that are the 6 months waiting for a job, those are the illegal people? Who's the illegal people?
There are no illegal.
There's one, you know what I mean. Who are the ones that we see on the ads that they're the undocumented, they're taking our jobs, they're taking our services, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're committing crime. What proportion are asylum seekers? Like if 90% of the people that come across the southern border seek asylum, then that puts it into perspective for the ones that are not. And then according to what you guys said, this is so darn complicated. I bless you for the jobs that you do. But there's months and years, and depending on what's family coming or not family coming, do they have an employer sponsor? Whatever. Who are they talking about? That are the ones that are, these people pay taxes, they don't get services. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they don't get services.
Correct.
They're not committing crimes, they don't have the right numbers. What is the proportion of people that come that seek asylum there?
So I don't know the specific statistic on, I can't say what the specific percentage of people who are actually lodging the 589 is. It's the application for asylum. It is it's a large proportion. The vast majority of our practice is asylum seekers. Other forms of relief are extremely limited, right? So if you don't show a fear, the government is currently basically turning you around anyway. So the vast majority of people that we're seeing are filing for asylum. The issue is, so there is a technical unlawful entry, there is. However, you're following a prescribed pathway to file for asylum. And so at that point, our argument would be, well, you're no longer, now you're in removal proceedings seeking relief. We filed the defensive application. You are now an asylum applicant, right? So you're triggering all these other protections.
You know, the government knows who you are, the government knows what you're doing, they don't have to have, all of those people are not.
So undocumented really means that you don't have a formal status in the United States, which an asylum seeker, you could argue that.
Yeah.
You could argue, I mean, so technically people with TPS, DACA, withholding of removal, and several other statuses, those are called color of law statuses. I mean, it's a very technical thing. So undocumented is generally anybody who is in a mixed status in the United States. An immigration judge or the USCIS hasn't made a final determination on their status. But within that, there's so many classifications of people that we just lump everybody together. And that's how we read the insecurity and the xenophobia, frankly.
It leaves open so much opportunity for education. This you know what I mean? Like you can make people alive about something that is not. We know I have people in my family that think those things that the parish was down on this type of thing. But then I mean people come and all the things easier. So I would love to be able to say, you know,
be able to say to people when they say that, 100% of the people that come to this country, that go through the process, pay taxes, but don't get served. Arizona people in Arizona say they're taking up our hospitals. I think they are, but that's what people believe, and it's so easy for people to believe that because there's so many inroads to these.
Okay, so, we could go on another 7 or 8 hours probably, but we should probably stop because it's almost 8 o'clock and even if you have some more burning questions, yes?
So I do want to make one other point about documented versus undocumented. First of all, it is completely a term created by law, right? Nobody is born, everyone is born undocumented. The government provides documents for you. In the United States, your document to prove your citizenship is your birth certificate. Or if you came here, it's your naturalization certificate or your certificate of citizenship or passport. And there are, I've had them, US citizens that immigration tries to deport because they didn't have that document. And you needed to prove, it's the papers please thing, right? Undocumented versus documented is an artificial concept because everyone is born undocumented and the government decides how documents are doled out. The other point I want to make, and then I'll cede my time, is under Biden, you might hear people saying, oh, Biden's giving out cell phones to these folks, but he sometimes is. But here's the trick. There's an app on it called an ICE app, which is ISAP, but it sounds like ICE app, but it pretty much tracks you. So here's your nice fancy phone, and now ICE knows where you are at all times. And so you want to talk about, and that's something that's new, right? And they check in every 2 weeks with a video and it has, coordinates and everything like that. So ICE always knows where they are. I mean, that's more documented than most of us. Well, I guess we all have phones, so the government knows where we are at all times. That's just about as documented as most people have with the federal government. And that's a policy that is humane because it does not, it's not restrictive, but it is a smart policy because it helps identify where people are. And if there's a backlog in the court, or they say, hey, we know you're in Massachusetts now, come to the Boston office instead of the Philadelphia office to check in with ICE. So that's another point of it too, is that there are these new policies within the Biden administration that aren't as draconian as Trump, that don't get the MAGA base riled up, but are pretty much keeping track on everybody that's going through the system. So it's a smart way to do it.
Grace has a question.
I guess a comment. Some of the talking points that I use that I've seen actually work is I'm a school counselor in a high school, and most of my kids are immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers. And I tell people, and I had even one guy even turn around and say, well, you're right. That the kids come in and they tell me that once they're like 12 and 13, the boys especially, if they don't join a gang, they're dead and their family is dead. And that's why they're coming here, basically. Yep. And the girls are being sexually assaulted, sexually abused. And these kids, they're scared to death, but they are so grateful, and their parents, for an education where I see the other kids and the parents that are born here, and they're not grateful, and they're screaming at me every day because they want more and more. And these kids are so grateful. I took them on a field trip, and it was so beautiful because they were so grateful and well behaved. Parents are working 2 to 3 jobs, and they just want to make a life for their family and not have their children die. The second point is a really good friend of mine is working on the border now. She was a missionary in Peru and Ghana for 40 years on the border, and it's the first time I've seen her cry in my entire life because she said it is horrible. She does a group for women. She says something like, and you may know this, I think it's 8 out of 10 females are sexually assaulted on the way, and that's children, young children, all the way up to adult women. So, I use those talking points. Like I had one guy who's a MICA, and he said now he's working with an immigrant. He's like, wow, you're right. This guy is great. And a lot of it is exposure. Like you said, Jeannie, these people, once they get exposed to these people and see how wonderful and grateful they are, I think it turns them around. Yep. But unfortunately, they're not.
It's a typical day for us. For me, I do a lot of asylum. David handles more what criminal, but also asylum as well. Mine tend to be, so last week it was a victim of sexual assault in the morning, 2 religious persecution cases, and an adult male who was trafficked and the victim of sexual abuse, intrafamilial sexual abuse. That was in one day. So sometimes the answer to the question isn't so much how to explain it, it's to tell people to get some fucking empathy. Like, we don't know what circumstances people are coming in, we don't know why, like, it's ridiculous. And somebody's gonna ask me, well, what, you don't know why people are coming in. You don't know, it could be a result of our failed fucking policies abroad, thank you. I mean, we do this stuff, we create some of these conditions abroad, a lot of them. But then you take the kids from the Northern Triangle, I mean, sexual abuse all over the place. So people need to be aware that these are the issues, these are the reasons people are coming in. You're not going to help with sexual abuse, sexual trauma, trafficking. I mean, is this what this country stands for now? So sometimes the answer really is just, I understand what you're saying, you want to know, but why do you think, why would somebody cross, run 6,000 miles to get into the United States?
Right, why do they cross their kids and they go across that barbed wire and all that stuff? Something really bad has to be happening where they were.
And I'm not yelling at you, it's just, we get that all the time, and it is so frustrating because we see day in and day out the appalling circumstances that people are in or have fled, and it's like, that's why people are here. That's why. It's not always economic in nature, it's not always political persecution, it's sexual abuse and trafficking and just things that nobody should be subjected to. And we've lost empathy in the United States. And I try to remind people of that. He's much more diplomatic than I am. Like that's where it starts and stops for me. So.
No, I like to actually like,
Shit.
go on.
Let's go. She's
That's right.
Right. So what I think, since it's 8 o'clock, I can't tell you guys enough how much we really appreciate. This has been the most informative meeting I think we ever had.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, this is great.
This is great. So you're gonna leave your cards in the back if you know them. Yeah.
We have some cards that we're going to leave in the back. If you know anyone that needs help, or if you generally just have questions or something, you can shoot us an email. We get about 400 phone calls a day, so you're more likely to get a hold of us with an email. We only get about 100 emails a day, so that
These guys have a great reputation, and I'll just tell you, I'm so proud of him. Sometimes he'll come home and he'll say there was this guy, and he was going to be deported, and his whole family was there to say goodbye to him, because they take you right from the courthouse to your deportation. And they said, it was just before Thanksgiving. They said, get ready to say goodbye. They were all crying, and then he pulls it out. Somehow he figures out some kind of a clause or some kind of a thing, and then he didn't get deported. And the family said, what? What's going on? And it was just amazing. Just before Thanksgiving, they could all be together. So that's the kind of work he does. And he's my son, so I'm so proud. But I mean, every day, but then other days that'll happen, and you'll see people ripped away from their families and going back to where they know they're going to be murdered. So it's a really
and that happened all the time under Trump, right? And that was, I mean, it's dehumanizing, and that's what's going to happen again if we don't stop him from getting back in the White House. That's what's known as a call to action. Let's get out.
Right. So thank you very much, guys. Katie and Dave. And if everybody would want to stack up their chair, that would also.